Hello, it's Grandma. Are you ready for Grandma's story time? I've got my story bag here. It's my bag with purple circles and golden elephants and blue circles with golden elephants and red circles. And it's my bag where Peter lives. Come out, Peter. What are you doing? Oh, here he comes. He's hiding. Why are you hiding? You're frightened of powerful magic. I wonder what sort of spells Mr. Spell will do. You don't know? No. We need to read the book and find out. Here we are. Here's the book. The Wishing Chair Again by Enid Blyton. What chapter are we up to, Peter? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21? We're up to chapter 21. Are you ready? Say goodbye to Peter. Bye-bye, Peter. Peter can go back in the bag. Put on your glasses, Grandma. Oops, there we are. And let's read The Wishing Chair Again. We're up to chapter 21. It's called A Very Exciting Time. They're sitting in the magic circle, remember? White chalk with blue chalk in the middle. The children, Chinky and Winks, shut their eyes. Mr. Spells began to mutter some magic words under his breath. And then he spoke some aloud, and then he suddenly shouted 3 spell words at the top of his voice, making everyone jump violently. There was a silence. And then Mr. Spells spoke in his ordinary voice.
You can open your eyes now. The spell is done.
They opened their eyes and looked around them in wonder. They were in the very biggest room they had ever seen in their lives, and the floor stretched endlessly away from them. The walls seemed miles away. Not far from them was a colossal pillar, or what looked like one. The ceiling seemed to have disappeared, or else was so far away that they couldn't see it. Certainly there was no sky above them, so probably the ceiling was still there. "What's that enormous wooden post?" said Peter in wonder. "It wasn't there just now."
It's the leg of the table,
said Mr. Spell surprisingly. What? What do you mean? It's much too big for that. Look, that's the wooden pillar, over there. And where are the chalk circles?
We're still in the middle of them,
said Mr. Spells with a laugh.
Do you mean to say you don't know what's happened?
No, said Peter. I feel funny, you know. But except that we appear to be in quite a different place, now I don't know what's happened. I do,
said Chinky.
You've used a very powerful go small spell, Mr. Spells, haven't you? Goodness, I was awfully afraid you weren't going to stop that spell soon enough. I thought we were going to shrink to nothing. How small are we?
Smaller than mice,
said Mr. Spells.
I wanted to make us small enough to creep under the door, you see.
How clever of you, said Molly joyfully. I see what's happened now. why the ceiling seems so far away, and why that table leg looks like a big pillar, and why we can't see the chalk circles. We'd have to walk a long way to get to them now.
Quite right,
said Mr. Spills.
Now I think we'd better make a move in case the giant comes back and guesses what I've done. I'm glad the spell went quite so well. Sometimes a powerful spell like that makes loud noises, and I've known it to make lightning come in the circle.
Gracious, said Peter. I wish it had. I'd have enjoyed our own private little storm.
The thing is, where's the door gone?
Said Chinky.
We've gone so small that the room is simply enormous, and the wall where the door is miles away. We'd better begin walking right round the walls until we come to the door.
But Mr. Spells knew where the door was. Carrying the wishing chair, which had gone small too, he led them for what seemed like several miles across the floor, and at last they came to where the door was fitted into the wall. A draught blew at them as they came near the enormous door.
That's the draught blowing under the bottom of the door,
explained Mr. Spells.
Now, I'm going to squeeze under first to make sure everything is safe. Be ready to follow me when you hear my call. And he disappeared under the door, bending himself double. Soon they heard his voice. Yes, come along. It's all right.
One by one, they squeezed under the door and found themselves in what they supposed must be the room outside. But of course now it seemed a very vast, dark place instead.
Shall I make us our right size again? Or keep us small?
Wondered Mr. Spells.
On the whole, I think we'll keep us small.
He led them across the room and down a passage, making them all keep very close to the bottom of the wall. It was a very good thing he did too, because around the corner they heard the sound of tremendous footsteps that shook the floor and made them tremble. The giant was coming along the passage. In a trice, Mr. Spells pulled them all into what appeared to be some kind of a mouse hole. It seemed as large as a cave to the children. They crouched down there until the footsteps had gone by, and then out they went as fast as they could.
I want to find the front door if I can,
said Mr. Spells.
We can easily slip under that. It must be at the end of this passage.
But before they reached it, a thunderous noise made them all jump nearly out of their skins. Bang, bang, thud, rat-a-tat-tat-tat! What is it? Cried Molly, and caught hold of Mr. Spells. What can it be? Mr. Spells laughed.
I think I can guess what it is,
he said.
It's Chinky's cousin, Sleep Alone. He's got tired of waiting for the castle, and he's knocking at the door to see what's happened. Oh dear. Now I don't know what will happen.
Well, plenty happened. When the knocker banged on again on the door, an answering roar came from inside the castle, and Twisty the giant came pounding along the passage in a fine temper.
Who's that knocking at my door? How dare you make this noise?
The door was swung open, and a wind blew down the passage at once, almost blowing the 5 people over. Sleep Alone stood outside, a small figure compared to the giant, but seeming a giant to the children now that they were very small.
Quick,
said Mr. Spells.
they're going to have a quarrel. Now's our chance to escape out of the door. But keep away from their feet, We're so small that neither of them will notice us.
The children ran with Winks and Chinky out of the door, keeping well up to the side. But they couldn't possibly go further than the top step, because the step down to the next step seemed like a cliff to them.
I'll have to take a chance now and turn us back to the right size,
said Mr. Spells.
Otherwise, we'll have to stand on this top step, and sooner or later, we'll get trampled on. Shut your eyes, please. Take hands and keep together. I haven't got time to draw chalk circles, so this spell will happen very quickly. As soon as you're the right size, run down the steps as quickly as ever you can and go to that tree over there. I'll bring the wishing chair and soon we'll be off and away.
What about Sleep Alone?
Said Chinky.
We promised he could have the castle.
He'll look after that all right.
Said Mr. Spells.
Sleep Alone is bolder now than I thought he was. Now, eyes shut and hold hands hard.
They all obeyed. Mr. Spells said the words that undid the Go Small spell and allowed them to shoot right up to their right size again. But as he said, it happened very quickly indeed, and all 5 of them gasped and fell giddy all over. They fell over.
Quick, get up! He's seen us!
Shouted Mr. Spells. He picked up the wishing chair, which had also gone back to its right size, and ran down the steps with it. Everyone followed. Sleep Alone and the giant had been having a real rough and tumble. The giant was stronger, of course, than Sleep Alone, but Chinky's cousin got in so many sly jabs and punches that the giant had completely lost his temper. He lashed out at Sleep Alone, who ducked, but the blow caught him just on the top of his head. He stumbled, and that would have been the end of him if the giant hadn't, at that very moment, caught the sight of his 5 prisoners running down the steps. He was so tremendously astonished that he forgot all about Sleep Alone and simply stood there, staring out of his saucer-like eyes. Then with a bellow, he was after them.
How did you escape?
He roared.
Come back, or I'll throw you all up to the moon.
Mr. Spells put down the wishing chair. He sat in it quickly and pulled Peter and Molly onto his knee. Winks and Chinky sat on the back.
Home chair,
said Mr. Spells, and at once the obedient wishing chair rose up into the air. The giant made a grab at it, but the chair dodged, and Mr. Spells hit the giant smartly on his outstretched hand. The giant yelped,
Oh!
Goodbye,
said Chinky, waving his hand. Meanwhile, what had happened to Sleep Alone? Plenty. When he saw the giant rushing after the others, he stood and stared for a moment. And then he grinned. He hopped into the wandering castle and shut the door very quietly. And when Twisty turned around to go back and finish his quarrel with Sleep Alone, there was no castle there. It had gone on its wanderings again. Oh dear, I wish we could stay and see the giant looking for his castle, said Molly. What a shock he's having. His prisoners all escaping, the wishing chair gone, and his castle wandering away with Sleep Alone in charge. Won't your cousin be thrilled to have such a wonderful place to sleep in, Chinky? The wishing chair didn't go back to the playroom. It went to Mrs. Spells' room. They went in to see Mrs. Spells, and told her their extraordinary adventures. To their surprise, Cinders was there and produced some excellent fruit buns that Mrs. Spills said he had just made. He really was a most remarkable cat. Molly glanced out at the window that looked out to sea. "Oh, look!" she cried. "There's our ship, the Molly. I wondered what would happen to her. She's come back, Mr. Spills."
Cinders brought her back.
Said Mrs. Spills.
He knew the ship wouldn't be needed again.
"It was a grand adventure," said Molly. "I was scared at times, you know, but somehow I knew everything would be right with Mr. Spills there. Thank you, Mr. Spills, for being such a good friend,"
Delighted.
said the enchanter.
Now, I think it's time you went home.
The children went to find the wishing chair, which was still in the backyard. They climbed into it with Winks and Chinky. "Take us home, chair," cried Peter. And up into the air it rose, flapping its big wings, and in 5 minutes' time they were all back in the playroom again. And that's the end of the chapter. Imagine that, having magic that made you shrink down, smaller than a mouse. And then more magic to make you big again. No wonder they fell over. Mr. Spills was very good at thinking a plan and using the magic, wasn't he? And now, who's back in the playroom? Peter and Molly, Winks and Chinky, and the wishing chair. It's not the end of the book. Come back tomorrow and we'll see if there's another adventure. Bye-bye.